Hello, everyone. My name is Courtney Pollock, and I am the Customer Marketing Coordinator for SWK Technologies. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, Supercharge Your Sage 100, Inventory Control with Scanforce, presented by Brian Berry. Before we get started, let's go over some housekeeping items. Everyone has been placed on mute to keep the background noise to a minimum. However, throughout the webinar, you can submit any questions you have. If you'd like to submit a question, look for the questions section or the chat box of your GoToWebinar, and we'll answer all questions at the end of the presentation. We're also recording this presentation and will be distributed tomorrow afternoon to all attendees, as well as those who registered but were unable to attend. And finally, we'd appreciate your participation in our closing poll and survey. With that said, we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to attend this webinar. SWK is here to help you fulfill your vision of a smarter and easier way to run your business by providing you with tools, support, software, and industry knowledge whenever you need it. So whether you're here researching a new solution or you're just here to learn, we'd like to encourage you to ask any questions you have. And lastly, as a quick reminder, SWK is constantly sharing important updates and software tips and tricks on our social media channels. We encourage you to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we'll post our recorded webinars and other learning content like this. And with that said, I'm going to hand it over to Brian to get us started today.
Great, thank you very much. Again, Brian Berry here with Scanforce. Happy to be with you folks today. I'm going to lead you on a quick tour of our warehouse management system, WMS for short. We'll talk a lot about barcoding and multi-bin and a wealth of topics. So a quick little agenda, give you a quick overview as to who we are, what we do, then we'll jump right into barcoding because barcodes drive the warehouse in the modern WMS world. And we'll talk about various functions. As I mentioned, we'll mention the multi-bin, which may be a topic that some are quite familiar with, others may have heard of it, but not quite sure exactly what it is. So we'll make sure we close those gaps. And lastly, I want to touch on a secondary application called mobile sales. Then we'll get into that poll in the Q&A right at the very end mentioned. So by way of very brief introduction, and I promise I won't read screens. I'm sure everybody went to kindergarten and you could do that yourself. Everybody's going to get a copy of this afterwards anyway, so no real reason to take a whole lot of notes. You can read these as you like. But the main takeaways from this slide is this is not our first rodeo. We've been around for the better part of 2 decades. We have over 800 site installations and over 8,000 users in the Sage 100 world. We grew out of the Sage 100 world. We had a Sage 100 partner that had a Sage 100 client that said, hey, I'd like to scan barcodes. So they wrote something for them. Somebody saw it and said, hey, that's cool. Could you add something else? It just sort of grew organically from there. It was eventually spun off into the company known as Scanforce today. And here we are, 20 years later, offering a variety of solutions, okay? Our solutions run on also a variety of applications. They can run on iOS, Apple, primarily Android-based rugged scanning devices. We'll talk more about that later. And of course, Windows as well. Now, one of the things that we've highlighted right there in the middle is the system can work in both a connected and disconnected environments. Let me spend just a second and tell you what that means. We have a lot of clients that come to us and say, so I need Wi-Fi to make this work. Well, what if I don't have great Wi-Fi coverage in my warehouse? Or what if I have an outdoor area where I have a big yard where I lay big bulky things down and I don't have any coverage out there? Can I still use the system? And the answer is a resounding yes. Our system is very unique in its architecture in that we don't require a full-time, real-time connection back to Sage to work. Once we start the transaction, we could go out and receive a 100 line item order without any connection back to Sage. And then when we reacquire the connection, we can sync and send that data right back into Sage. So we'll talk more about architecture as we go, but now I want to move on and tell you a little bit more detail about our offerings that we have. When most people hear the name Scanforce, if you have some familiarity with us, you think warehouse management. That's the WMS, warehouse management solution. So we have 3 different editions. We call them Core, Select, and Premier. And I often tell people, don't think of these as small, medium, and large, because they do have very different feature sets, but we have some very large clients that use the Core system, which has the least amount of functionality because it meets their needs. Then we have other much smaller users that need the Premier version because they have more needs and they need more features and functions. So don't think of it in terms of the size of your organization. What we do from the very first step, when you talk to your SWK rep and you say, I like to talk about the barcode scanning stuff that the guy Brian mentioned. we're going to have a call called a discovery, and we're going to overturn every stone in your warehouse, and we're going to find out how you work today, how you want to work in the future, and we're going to find out what your wants and needs are, and then we'll be able to help you position into the right product regardless of your size. Okay. As part of that, down right below, you see label printing. Barcodes, as I said before, drive the warehouse. And a lot of products, if you're working in the consumer goods world, well, they come in pre-labeled. That's great. But for many of us, they don't. So stuff may come in with the vendor's barcode. We want to put our own barcode on there. Or maybe you're a manufacturer, you make things, and you want to label that finished good. Well, we have a labeling suite built into our warehouse management system that allows you to print labels at a variety of operations like receipt of goods, manufacturing at the shipping point, things of that nature, okay? Now, we also have manufacturing over to the right, all the way back to legacy work order from Sage, bill of materials, production management. We have a module that are on our handheld that dovetails into the corresponding module in Sage for each of those. We also have another little piece that's kind of neat called make to order. This is an add-on in the production management world specifically. So what happens is when you enter a sales order, we can create the work ticket automatically from the sales order when we recognize the need that something has to be created. So we can remove one whole step from the process right from the get-go. Okay, so more on manufacturing a little later in the presentation. The last thing I'll talk about is mobile sales. And I'm not going to go through a lot of the detail here. I have one slide dedicated to that, and we'll get into that. But basically, it allows your users, whether they're at a counter sales or at a conference, at a trade show on the floor, or whether they're sitting down from across from your customer's desk taking an order, we allow them to do that remotely. Okay. Now, some of the things that really set us apart from anything else out there, number one, speed. Just based on the architecture of our system, it is incredibly fast. In fact, years ago, we did something called the Million Record Challenge. We bumped in 1 million records into Sage, which is a lot. And then we asked for one discrete piece of information, and it returned it in less than 0.03 seconds. That's screaming fast, even in computer type speeds, okay? So the point here is your users aren't going to be slowed down by the system. The reality is we expect to speed your people up. So in other words, think about if they are receiving something, if they take a piece of paper and they have to find the line item, write down an item, maybe a lot number or a serial number and a quantity and where they put it, they're writing all that down. Wouldn't it be easier just to go beep, scan an item, beep, scan the shelf it's on and type in 10 pieces, which is faster. So the technology actually speeds people up. It certainly doesn't slow it down. It's also very intuitive. When we do a live demo for you, if that's something you're interested in, that's certainly something we can do for you. You'll see that the flow of the screens is very logical. You know, what's the PO number? What's the item we're receiving? How many are receiving? It will just naturally step your people through it. I always joke that I could probably take a scanner and throw it out in the middle of your warehouse and somebody could just pick it up and start doing their job, okay? Now, I promise we still offer training, but what I'm saying is the system is very intuitive, very easy for your users to pick it up, learn it, and they'll adopt it. And, you know, after all, if people think, you know, oh man, physical count is so boring, clipboards, well, let's hand them a ray gun, tell them they're Han Solo. They can go out in the warehouse and shoot barcodes. It's a lot more fun. And finally, support. And if there's one thing that I want you to take away from this presentation above any other, it's the level of support that we provide. And anyone over at SWK will back this up, ask them, they're your trusted advisors, so don't take my word for it. They'll tell you the service that we offer is second to none. We truly view it as a lifelong partnership, and we definitely want to take care of you. Okay, so that's enough about who we are. Let's talk about what we do. I told you before, it all starts with the barcode. So let's spend just a second and talk about the barcode before we dive into the technology of what we do on the warehouse management side. First of all, barcodes have languages just like we do, English, Spanish, French, German, whatever it is. Barcodes have languages, and we call them symbologies. And everybody might use some different symbology. And the point that you need to take away from this is that it really doesn't matter. If you use one type of barcode and your vendor uses another type of barcode and 5 other vendors use 5 other different barcodes, doesn't matter. Your users won't care. The barcode scanners themselves have this symbology, the decode algorithm is what it's called. It's all embedded in the scanner. So when they pull the trigger, it's going to convert it to human readable text, and your user will know exactly what that barcode means, okay? Now, you may see one barcode like the one on the left, where every individual piece of information is barcoded. What's the part number, the quantity, the PO it came in on, who's the vendor or the supplier, what's the serial number, all these kind of things. And everything's its own barcode. Well, if I wanted to scan the PO number, for instance, how do I know I'm getting just that information? When I point the scanner at it and I pull the trigger, how's it going to discreetly give me that number and not one of the other 18 barcodes that are on the piece of paper? Well, we can make this easier by looking at the one on the right-hand side. Now, this is a two-dimensional barcode. The ones on the left are all one-dimensional. We typically call those like a picket fence barcode. They're typically like what you would find on any sort of consumer goods. You go to the supermarket, any box of cereal has a barcode on it that looks just like that, just straight lines. But the one on the right is a two-dimensional barcode, and we can encode a ton of information there. In fact, as the story goes, we can encode the entire Gettysburg Address the size of a postage stamp. That's how dense we can pack information into that symbology or that language of the barcode. So 9 times out of 10, we are moving to two-dimensional barcodes. Now, the scanners can read either of them interchangeably. Doesn't matter to the scanner. It won't matter to your user. The user just points and fires. And let's say that the part number and the serial number are both embedded in there, and you're at a receiving step and you want to know, well, what part am I receiving and what's the serial number of this particular item? Well, we're going to teach the scanner how to decode that and break it apart. The term is called parsing the barcode. So we're going to parse it or break it into its constituent elements, and we're going to put the part number in its requisite field, and we're going to put the serial number in the field where it belongs. So now your user has filled 2 fields on our receiving screen with 1 trigger pull. It's the ultimate in efficiency, and the best part, it's 100% accurate, okay? How accurate are users when they write things down on paper and then the paper makes its way to the office and someone else has to interpret their chicken scratch handwriting and key it in? I always joke that if I was in charge of that, we'd always be off by 5 because my 4s look like 9s and nobody'd be able to tell the difference. If that's ever happened to you in your world, barcodes solve that problem because they're 100% accurate, okay? So now that we know what barcodes are and the fact that barcodes drive the system, let's jump in and talk a little bit about the feature set within the warehouse management system that you can take advantage of. And by the way, our system, it's very modular. So we will oftentimes have someone start and they say, you know what, we just want to start with receiving. And once we get receiving under our belt, then we'll roll out to the other things. That's perfectly fine with us. We're perfectly happy to do a phased rollout. We don't want you to bite off more than you can chew, okay? And then we have other customers that say, I want to do receiving, shipping, picking, physical inventory, and add all kinds of bells and whistles, and we'll start from day 1. And that's okay too. We're going to train your users very thoroughly, and as I mentioned before, it's very intuitive. So once they learn one application in our system, really, really easy to pick up on the other ones, okay? So let's start at the start. We've got to get stuff in the building first. Let's talk about receiving, okay? Now, this is about as messy as any of our screens will ever look. 9 times out of 10, or maybe 9 times out of 100, we're only going to ask your user for 1 piece of data per screen. Like, what's the PO number? What's the first item? What's the quantity? What shelf are you going to put it on? We just sort of step them through the logical steps 1 screen at a time. And as they give us 1 piece of data, we validate it. If it's correct, we move them on to the next. If they're supposed to receive 10 and they accidentally type in 100, well, that's a big problem if it got into Sage, but we're going to give the user instant feedback and say, hey, you can't receive 100 when you're supposed to receive 10, okay? And then once it's correct, we advance on to the next screen. But I put this particular screen to show you because I want you to see the level of detailed information that we can capture if you need to. Now, not everybody deals with lot numbers, okay? But if you're in the food world, that's really, really important to you. So we can take a lotted item and automatically it turns on the lot field just for those lotted items in your inventory. So if you have some items that are lotted and some items that aren't, well, the system is smart enough to know, well, on this item, I need to ask for a lot. On this item, I don't, so you just won't see that field. And sometimes you may want to enter your own lot number, but you also want to capture the vendor's lot number, okay? And then we can take it 1 step further. If you don't want to have to assign your own lot number every time, we can let the system do it for you. It's built in there. There's a system called auto lot. And oftentimes people will use something like the Julian date dash and then a sequential counter. So that way, every time downstream, when you look at that lot number, you know exactly when it hit your dock and it was the 10th receipt or the 100th receipt of that day or whatever, okay? So quantities, expiration dates, another thing that we can capture. So again, this is about as complicated as any screen that you'll ever see in our system. Most of the time, it's just one field. But in this case, I just want to show you the links that we can go to capture all this information, okay? And if any of this is required, like lot number, for instance, we're not going to let your user jump off the screen without it, okay? Because we know you have to have it in Sage before you can, do anything with that product or resell that product. So we make sure it gets entered up front, okay? Now, while you're doing this receiving process, when you're entering quantities, some of you may buy things by the case, but stock and sell by the each, okay, or vice versa. So we allow for that. Over on the left-hand side, see that little screen snip that I took out of a Sage inventory maintenance screen. So I'm stocking it by the each, but I'm buying it by the case. If I buy it by the case, if that's what's on the purchase order, well, that's what's going to show up on my receiving screen. So it's going to default for the user doing the receipt on the dock, just like this. We bought 10 cases. What actually showed up? Well, if you want them to receive 10 cases, they simply type in 10, it'll validate it and go on. If they typed in 100, it would kick it back and say invalid quantity. They could fix it. But maybe you want them to count each individual one to make sure that every case is completely full. So all you have to do is toggle, see the little caret drop down here, and you can toggle between case and each, and it does the math if there's 12 in each case, and it says, well, you're supposed to have 120 in those 10 cases. So the system does a lot of the math and a lot of the thinking for your users to allow them to concentrate on what they're physically doing without having to worry about a lot of the ancillary stuff, okay? So sometimes you're receiving one PO at a time, and that's really simple, but do you ever place an order on a vendor and maybe you place 5 orders or 10 orders against them and you get one truckload and it may have all 5 or all 10 orders on one truck? Well, if you have, one of your top 10 items, that item you may have ordered it on every PO. So we have customers tell us all the time, I get multiple POs at one time and I've got the same item on all of them. If I receive one PO at a time, I have to say, well, there's 10 of these on this PO and go put them on a shelf. And then there's 20 on the next one and go put that on the shelf. And your people are going back and forth to the same location 5, 10 times. Well, that's not efficient, okay? That gives me heart palpitations. I can't handle that. I'm all about efficiency. So we have this system called wave receiving. And what it does is it allows you to group orders together, and it will look at all of them and say, hey, this item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's on every order. And here's the total quantity. So I can check the shipment and say, yep, the total quantity is here. It allows me to receive it in totality and then put it away at one time. So now your user's only making one trip back into the racking system to put those away instead of 5 or 10 different trips. Okay, so we, again, overturn every stone we can to find as many efficiencies. We're all about finding those little hidden labor expenses that don't show up on the balance sheet. There is no line item for how many times Johnny had to walk from the receiving dock back into, the back end of the shelving system to put away the same darn thing. But if we could do it once, well, all of a sudden Johnny's a lot more efficient. And if we add that up by every line item on every order, every day, every week, every month, times every user doing it, that's a real tangible labor savings at the end of the month that you could take to the bank. And those are the kind of extents that we go to find those sorts of cost savings. Excuse me, those sorts of cost savings for you, okay? So let's roll on now and let's talk about how we're gonna stock that stuff once we get it in. Now I mentioned multi-bin at the onset. Again, some of you may have great experience with multi-bin, you may be using it. Others, maybe you have heard of it, but you're not quite sure where it is. Well, basically, if you think about Sage inventory, out of the box, you're allowed one location field for every item code. That's not overly realistic for most modern warehouses. Most of you probably have maybe a picking location, but you might also have an overstock or an overflow location, maybe a top shelf or a dusty back corner, something like that. Or maybe you want to see that some are sitting on the receiving dock. They just came in. I just got 10 more. They're sitting right there. They haven't been put away yet. Okay. This is all the types of information that our multi-bin shows. So we co-wrote this multi-bin solution, and Sage adopted it, standardized on it. In fact, the basic version of this is a free download from Sage. A lot of you probably didn't even realize that you could get multi-bin for free. Talk to your SWK rep about it. It's called DSD Scanforce Multibin. You know, a lot of you already have DSD enhancements. They're a big programming house. We co-wrote this product with them. It's a free download. And then the advanced version of it is embedded in one of the versions or editions of our warehouse management system. And it does a whole lot more than just the visibility that you see here. This is just one item, but look at all the places where it lives. I've got a couple of picking locations. I've got an overstock location. I can show unique pallets if I want to, and how much is on each pallet and where those pallets are. Some's on the receiving dock. There's 111. I've already picked them, and they're sitting in a staging location ready to go out the door. It gives me fantastic visibility of where everything is in every little nook and cranny. Okay. Now, Multibin can do a whole lot more than this, but this is level one. This is the visibility part, and this is available to you for free right now as a download from Sage. Okay. So if there's questions about that, please ask them in the chat, and we get those questions answered for you. Okay. Now, we know that we've got this item in multiple locations. So if we want to ship it out, if we want to pick it, where does the person go? Do they go to this location, this picking location, or that picking location? Well, part of Multibin is what we call auto allocations. And when you hear me say the term allocation, I want you to think reservation. So when an order is entered, we have the ability to reserve stock. Well, how do we know where to reserve it? Well, first of all, we give you a list of numerous business rules, and we have different set of rules for lotted and serialized inventory and a whole separate set of rules for items that are not lotted or serialized. So we actually double the amount of flexibility that you have there, and you can have different rules for different classes of items. So a lot of people standardize on FIFO, first in, first out. So I'm going to use that as my example, but just know that we have many more business rules that we can apply here. FIFO is just one of them. It happens to be the most popular, so that's what I'll talk about today. So if I do FIFO, remember I told you I had two picking locations and I had an overstock location on that last multi-bin screen? Well, if I've got things sitting in all these different places, I want to create a reservation and tell the user where to go get stuff. Well, if FIFO is my goal, the system will keep up with the dates. It knows when we put stuff in slot A or slot B or shelf D or whatever. So we can send the user and create the reservation in the shelf to the part in the racking system that has the oldest material. So now your users don't have to think about where the oldest stuff was. Did this stuff come in last week or did that stuff come in last month? Can't remember. The system keeps up with all that for them. So there's no guesswork. There's also no getting it wrong. Okay, and letting things spoil on the dock just because your folks forgot something was sitting back there. The system always knows, it keeps up with all that stuff. Okay, so it will maintain FIFO for you. Now, so we create a reservation. That's the auto allocation part here. So we've reserved inventory in a specific bin in the warehouse. How do we convey that information to the user? Well, that's what we call directed picking. And I think this is one of the crown jewels of the whole WMS. Okay, so on the handheld, if I say I want to ship order number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's going to say, okay, go to row A, shelf B, bin number 3. And I go there and it says, I have reserved 3 on that shelf for you. Okay, I simply scan the shelf, scan the item, it validates all that to make sure I'm in the right place and pulling the right thing, and I enter 3. And it tells me exactly what to do. There's no guesswork. And there's no walking onto one side of the warehouse and going, oh shoot, I thought we had some of this here. Well, now I got to walk to the other side of the warehouse. That's the old way. We don't do that anymore. The system will tell the user exactly where to go, and it's reserved the material, so we have very high confidence that it's there. We can pick it complete. Okay. And if it's not, we make allowances for that. Sometimes you may get there and something's damaged and you just can't ship it. Well, you have to be able to look and see where else it is and maybe you go get it somewhere else. But we have all these things built into the system so your users don't have to overthink the process and not make mistakes. Okay. We try to eliminate as many of those little simple careless errors as possible. Okay. And this happens every single time you pick. All right. So if you're interested in inventory accuracy, this is where it's at. That's why I say this is one of the crown jewels of the system, because this makes sure that you're taking something out of the right bin. So we relieve the quantity there. That way, Sage, multi-bin, everything knows exactly how many pieces we have in every spot up to the second, always, okay? All right. let's move on and talk a little bit about manufacturing. I know not everybody does manufacturing, but I did want to touch on this because it's really important for those of you that do. So if you want to tune out for a few seconds, I got you. We'll come back and we'll hit, as soon as we're done with manufacturing, pick up on the rest of the stuff for the distribution folks. So the primary ones that we work with are bill of materials and production management. Like I said before, we still have work orders. So if you're running an older version of Sage and you're still on work order, we can still talk, okay? But bill of materials, obviously, it allows you to issue out raw materials to a bill. And then when you do a completion, we're going to wipe those out of inventory and we're going to create the new finished good or goods. Okay. And we allow you to create a label for that finished good if you want to. And this all happens in real time, not tomorrow. One of the biggest complaints I hear from Sage 100 users is time lag. I do things and then I write it down on paper. And there's a lag between when that paper gets checked into the shipping office or wherever it goes. And there's a time lag between when it transfers that piece of paper from the shipping office to inside when some clerical admin person is supposed to take it out of another bin. They go to their desk, they shuffle it around, then they key it into a batch in Sage. Well, rather than having a user that's doing the completion write it down, just let them punch it into the system and say I made 10 and hit the button, boom, it's in a Sage batch instantly. Okay, I'll even take it one step further for you. We have an application built in called AutoPost. And what AutoPost will do is when it senses that batch, something flow into that batch, we backflush it instantly and automatically post it, hence AutoPost. So now Sage goes from a batch-based system to a real-time inventory system, okay? And not only have we cut out on the pieces of paper and paper falling behind a desk and the time lag and interpreting the chicken scratch and rekeying information and double touches and double entries, but now we don't have to process the batch. So people tell me all the time, it's like I received something today or I made something today and it's sitting on the dock and I can touch it, but I can't do anything with it because I'm waiting on somebody in the office to get off their duff and actually process the batch, okay? Because it's not real in Sage yet. I can't take it to the next step in processing. Or if I got a back ordered sales order, I can't ship the darn thing out because it's just sitting there in a batch. I gotta wait. Well, with AutoPost, it's instantaneous. You hit the button on the handheld to say I did it and it's live and now I can do something with it, okay? Same thing with production management. We can do all those same functions, but we can also do the labor tracking. We actually give you two different methods of inner labor tracking. One we call time clock. That's the most popular. We give you a big green button that says clock in. You do what you got to do. Then a big red button that says clock out, just like the time clock on the wall that you punch, okay? But sometimes we have people that say, well, you know, I got a guy that sets up a machine and lets it run and sets up another one and sets up another one. He's running 3 machines simultaneously. If he did the time clock, he would say attribute an hour to each of the 3 jobs, making it look like he worked 3 hours in a 1-hour period. Well, that's not right. So we allow him to go in and say, well, I spent 20 minutes on this job and 20 minutes on that one and 20 minutes on the other. So we allow you a couple different methods to enter labor, but we make it really, really simple and streamlined for the user. So I'd love to show that to you in real time, okay? Now, when we do enter that labor, where does it go? Well, that's this screen right here. I just took a screenshot of the top half of what we call our management console. Our management console is just all the detail about things that are happening in your warehouse. And we actually don't license this. You can have this loaded on as many PCs as you want in the system, and you can control who sees what. But specifically here, I'm looking at this labor tracking tab. And you'll see here, I've got all these work tickets here, and the ones that are highlighted in yellow on the time duration, if those are the ones, if I look at it right now and I see yellow, that's what's happening on my shop floor right now, okay? Because these up here at the top, they have a start time and an end time and a duration, okay? So they're done. But if it's highlighted in yellow, that means it's going on right now, or at the very least, somebody hasn't stopped the clock, okay? I'll draw your attention to this. Look at these durations. I got 12 minutes, 5 minutes, hour and a half, 2 minutes. Here's the outlier, okay? What's the chances that old Javier here, when he was doing this, forgot to clock out before he went to lunch? Okay, pretty good. So if Javier comes to me hat in hand and says, hey boss, sorry, I just forgot to clock out. Hey, no problem, Javier, got your back. I just go right into this transaction, either here or here, and it's real time. I can go in there and I can change the duration time or change the stop time and make it correct. Then once I'm happy with it, I can select one at a time, or I hit the button up at the top and it will select everything that's ready to go, everything that's not highlighted, and then I submit it, that's when it goes and updates all those production manager work tickets back in Sage, okay? Not before. We hold them here so you can massage the data a little bit and do it in mass and then submit them, okay? All right, so if you are in production management, let's definitely talk. Let's have a much thorough conversation, and I'll show all this to you live, all right? So let's get back into distributions. Everybody that's not a manufacturer, wake up, and let's talk back about pallet tracking. So some of you deal in pallet level quantities, not just onesie twosies. So is there a more efficient way to handle that than counting every little single thing on there every time I touch it? Well, of course there is, okay? So our pallet tracking is actually an extension of multi-bin. If you recall, when I showed you that multi-bin screen earlier on, I showed you that I had a couple of pallets. I had 10 on one and maybe 15 on another. I can tell you exactly where that pallet's sitting in the warehouse. So if you receive at the pallet level, I can say there's 10 cases on this pallet. Look, this guy's driving them around right now. There's shrink wrapped right here. Maybe there's 20 cases. And this comes in with this big label on it. Well, maybe it's already got an ID on there. Or maybe I slap my own label on there and I call it pallet 1001, and this one's pallet 1002 down here at the bottom, okay? And I can go sit those aside with all these others. Well, then if I get an order for it, I can just go grab that pallet and ship the whole thing in totality. I don't need to identify every part and piece that's on it. I can just say I'm shipping pallet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sage knows everything that's on it, and it's all out the door. Okay, or maybe coming out of manufacturing, or maybe just at any point in time, you get a sales order from a customer and they want 50 different things. Well, you could put all of them on one pallet or multiple pallets and give them a name and put them on a shelf. And then a day, a week, a month later, you get a release from your customer that says, hey, I need that stuff now. Well, you don't have to go and identify all those 50 things anymore. You just scan pallet 1002 and it's out the door. Again, building efficiencies, saving labor. Do it one time, record it, we'll know it forever, and then we can make it much more efficient on the back end. Talk about speeding up your shipping. If all you have to do is scan one barcode and put a pallet on there and the Sage knows everything that just happened, that's efficiency, okay? So again, what we consider pallet tracking, we also generically call it license plating, because some of you may not deal in pallets, you may deal in totes or gaylords or barrels or bags or buckets or whoever, what the heck it is. It doesn't matter. It's just a way of classifying a group of items that we put together in one carton, if you will, be it a tote, a bag, a barrel, a pallet, whatever. So I kind of use the terms pallet tracking and license plating interchangeably, okay? So if that's of interest to you, please reach out. We've got a great story to tell you, okay? Now, a few of the other things that I'll touch on, I don't have an individual screen, just want to mention that we're capable of doing it. One is split picking. Let me give you a real world example, okay? Let's say I'm in the food business and I've got a dry goods area and I've got a refrigerated area and I've got a freezer area that's like -40, okay? Well, I don't want the guy in the freezer picking the stuff in the dry goods area because he's got coveralls, he'd overheat, okay? He's got all those insulated coveralls. So what I really want to do is I want to take the pick ticket for that order that may have items in all 3 sections and split them into 3 different pick tickets. That's exactly what we do. So you're going to get, order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5B, and so on. It's a physical piece of paper that spits out that's got a letter classification on the end. So now I can give those out to 3 different people. They pick their part of the equation, and then it all comes together on the back end, okay? And we can split this by area of the warehouse or by product group. There's multiple different ways. We give you a great amount of flexibility, okay? Container receipt management. A lot of people call this on the water, okay? So if you ship things from overseas, it comes in a container. Well, you may have 10 or 20 or 100 different POs that are all contained on one container. All right, so what we allow you to do, we're going to add something to Sage for you. We're going to add container number at the PO header level. So you can key in that container number. That will electronically in Sage tie all of those POs together by that container, okay? So you're going to get an advanced shipping notice. When the ASN hits, you own it, because I'm guessing this is FOB shipping point, so it's yours as soon as they close the lock on that container. So for a month or however long it takes to get here, if you own it, it's just not in your possession. We're going to allow you to pre-receive that into Sage, into a virtual warehouse. That way, anybody that looks can see exactly how many we have on the floor and exactly what's due in, okay? Because that virtual warehouse, again, that's our quote on the water warehouse, all right? So then when the box shows up, the container shows up, you open it up, we're going to give you a really simple program where you can just scan everything that's on it and verify that it's all matches the ASN. And if it does, behind the scenes, transparent to your user, we're going to do a transfer. We're going to move it from the in-transit warehouse into your 000 warehouse or your 001 warehouse or whatever it is where you're working, okay? So it just simplifies handling containers. It makes the visibility 100 times better for your people, and it makes receiving it faster, okay? Now, Starship integration, we love this one. It's our newest toy. So if you're familiar with Starship, V Technologies, they're a third-party provider in this market. They have a solution that ties into all the major parcel shipment companies. So if you're shipping UPS, FedEx, whatever. So the way it's always worked in the past is we pick the order, we send that to shipping data entry in Sage. From there, your users would go and they would log into a PC, into Starship. Starship, they would then find the order. It then sucks that information up from shipping data entry. So we always said we played nice in the sandbox with Starship. We send them information to shipping data entry, they grab it and pull it up into their system. From there, they can print their labels, okay? And that's been working that way for years, and people have been very successful with it. But we've made a better mousetrap. So what we've done is we've developed, instead of a dashed line to Starship, we have a direct line to Starship. We have a full integration to them now, and this is exclusive to us, something that we co-wrote together. So what happens now is when you're in that pick-pack operation on our handheld, and you're selecting those items, we're going to flip you to one extra screen and allow you to enter the weight. And there's a drop down for box size. So they just say, and by the way, that box size, if you specify UPS as the carrier, it gives you the UPS boxes. If you specify FedEx, it gives you theirs in the drop down. So it's got some intelligence built into it. So they select the box type, and when they load the box, they just hit the button, instantly the labels print out. No one has to leave and go sign into Starship anymore and physically, manually request those labels. It's going to happen automatically, simultaneous with when you're putting it in the box, because your hands are already on it. It's so much more efficient. Like I said, this is our newest toy in our toolbox. So we'd love for you to play with it. Just let us know if that's of interest to you, okay? Now, I showed you the labor tab a few moments ago on our management console. I wanted to mention one other thing that we have that's a fantastic tool. It's probably the most popular thing in the whole system. It's this transactions tab, okay? Now, at a high level, we don't keep data outside of Sage. We are directly integrated with Sage, and we say, I want to receive this PO. So it goes into Sage, it grabs the line item detail, pulls it to the handheld, we do line items and quantities, do the data validation, hit the button, boom, it goes right back into Sage, updates receipt of goods entry, okay? But I told you that when that happens, we're going directly into Sage, but we're going to keep a mirror image of that transaction right here, okay? For instance, if I was shipping order number 182, okay, and I've got multiple lines here, I can see the item codes, descriptions, quantities, okay? I can see the user. I have their initials here. I also have the ability to pull their full name if you want to. We can change this up how we wish. I can even see the physical handheld device that they were using. If you have 10 scanners, I can tell you which one they were doing the transaction on. I can tell you exactly how long it took them to do that ship or receipt or whatever they were doing, start to stop time. Lots and serial numbers located right here. So you can see this is sort of a step through a day in the life. I did an inventory transfer. I did a receipt on PO number 10033. I had 4 line items. I did some physical counts. I did some shipping. I had a Starship integration as part of it, okay? So this tells you every transaction that happened. Every time you send data from a handheld back to Sage, we keep a record of it. Now, how does that benefit you? Let's say you do lot numbers, okay? And your customer calls and says, hey, I've got a problem with lot number R654312. You come to this screen, you type in R654312, and I'm going to show you a list of every single transaction where you ever touched that lot number, when it was initially received, where you moved it during a transfer, if somebody physically counted it, if we picked against it 10 times, if we moved it in the middle of the process. And I'm going to show you who did it, when they did it, how they did it, on what transaction number they did it on, everything about it. If you need to backtrack and find out what orders it might have gotten shipped out on, it's going to be on one screen right here, and it takes you all of 2 seconds to type that number in, and it's available to you. It's a fantastic tool from a management perspective to look through and see exactly what your workers have done. Okay, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot you can do here. In fact, I told you can change this view. If you right click up here, it's got a column chooser. You can hide columns, add columns, move things around. If you don't like this here, order number, you can move it way over here to the left if you like. And then when you got it set the way you want it, you come up here and you give it a name and you save it. And you can come back to Brian's list every single day or once every Monday or whenever you need to. And then if you want to export that data, let me get my cursor back here. If you want to export that data, you click up here and we'll give you 10 different ways you can export it. You can put it into a PDF and print it out for a meeting, or you can pull it into Excel and massage the data offline. It's a really powerful tool. You also have the ability to go over here and click on dashboards. You can see all kind of widget type reports, bar charts and pie charts and everything else, and see exactly what's happening. In fact, we have some customers that actually mount flat screen TVs up in the wall above like the shipping office, and they have status. You know, how many inbounds do we have today? How many orders do we have today? How many have not been picked, or how many have not been shipped out yet? So everybody has a complete status of where what things are, or the state of the warehouse, basically. Okay, so there's a lot that you can do here. It's definitely not a static system. It's dynamic. You can make changes and alterations however you like. Okay, all right, so that's our warehouse management system just at a glance. I know I glossed over a lot of different topics there. Hopefully something piqued your interest. But I do want to talk about one more thing, and that's mobile sales. This is the secondary product in our product line to the warehousing side. So what mobile sales does for you is it allows people like your field reps, if they go out and sit across from your customer's desk and they say, what do you need on the shipment this week? Okay, they can punch it all in on an iPad, hit the button. If it's a cellular iPad, it'll go directly into sales. And that pick ticket is printing out before they even stand up and shake their guy's hand. Okay. It can also be used really effectively if you have a counter sales or a will call department. So people walk in and say, hey, I need 2 of these and 10 of those. Well, your people can just walk around with the person and punch it all in, and they can turn the screen around and say, hey, is this what you want? If they say yes, I can capture a signature right there, and it's saved in Sage forever. And you can even put that signature on the invoice before you send it out, okay? It's also great for use at trade shows. If you take orders from the show floor, you know, trade shows are starting to come back now. So if that's an issue for you, talk to us about it. Consignment customers, if you put material on your customer's floor and they basically enter a sales order for, you know, or they call you and say, hey, I use some until you enter an order for them, let them enter the order on a tablet. And that way it gets transmitted to you electronically, automatically. You cut out the human equation. Again, the time log goes down, the time lag rather, and then you pick up an efficiency because it's less time your people have to spend on the phone dealing with something, okay? And eliminating errors, it's fantastic because all the pricing stuff will flow in, all the shipping information will flow in. It gives the user instant availability. So if I'm the guy out in the field and I'm talking to the customer across my desk, I can see instantly, oh, you know, I don't have any in my warehouse here, but I've got 5 in the Charlotte warehouse. I can have those shipped in a couple of days. Does that work for you? Okay, so they don't have to get on the phone and call anybody. It's all right there. It's about giving more timely information and more accurate information to your customers. Keep your customers happy, they'll keep you happy. Okay, that age-old adage. So it's a lot more efficient, and it does not require a constant data connection. I mentioned before that if you have a Wi-Fi enabled tablet, you can send that data back and forth in real time. Otherwise, when you get a Wi-Fi signal, you can just sync up and it records all the quantities that you have on hand and all that customer's order history and all that stuff, and it's available to them at the touch of a button. Okay? All right, so 2 topics. Mobile sales, that's one little thing, and then the warehouse management system is the bigger thing, okay? If any of those are of interest to you, I certainly hope you will talk to your SWK rep about that, and they can set up a one-on-one meeting with me. We'll listen to your needs, and we'll go through all of that, okay? So I'm gonna turn this back over now. I know we've got a poll that we want you to participate in, and then we wanna see what sort of questions have flowed in on the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, for such an informative presentation. I love the Han Solo reference. And like Brian said,
that was my hero.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good one. It was a good one. And like Brian said, we're going to move on to Q&A now. So take this as an opportunity to ask any questions you have. You have an expert opinion. And while you're getting those questions into either your chat box or the question box of your GoToWebinar, we'd appreciate your participation in a quick poll. So you should see that pop up on your screen. We're just curious to know what your next steps are. And then we're gonna go right into Q&A. And thank you for everyone who has already answered. We will keep the poll open for just a few more seconds. And Brian, it looks like we've already got some good questions coming in, so.
Great, fire away.
Awesome. Thanks for everyone who answered the poll. We're gonna close that down now. And let's get started with some Q&A. So Brian, the first question I have for you is about the Starship portion you talked about. So
right.
This question is wondering, is that something they buy through you, this additional Starship piece?
Yeah, so Starship is an independent third party in the Sage 100 world, just like we are. So you would contact them and they would tell you what it would take to get up and running on their shipping system. And then from us, we would just add the Starship enhancement piece to our warehouse management system. So it would be something that you would get really from both sides, Starship and from us.
And to add to that, Brian, also, if you reach out to your SWK rep, we're also familiar with the Starship product, and that's something they can help you with, connecting the two pieces and, really talking about what would work best for you. Brian, our next question is, in pallet tracking, can I build a pallet anytime I want or only during the shipping process?
Oh, that's a good question, because I think I was pretty specific when I gave an example. So yes, we give you settings behind the scenes that control the way the system works. There's so many settings, you'd go blind reading them all. So the system overall is very flexible. And likewise here with pallet tracking, license plating. So you can turn it on at the receiving level if you want to receive at the pallet level. You could turn it on at the shipping level. And another little caveat is we have a feature called pick to pallet. So basically what happens is if you need to build a pallet and you've got big, bulky, heavy things and you've got little, small, light, dainty things, well, we don't want to put the eggs on the bottom of the canned goods in the bag, right? So the system will recognize that and it will say, go to this location and pick the big, heavy, bulky thing first and put those on the bottom of the pallet. And then it will direct your user to go to the other location where the small, dainty thing is that needs to go on the top. Okay, so that's all part of that. And then aside from both receiving and shipping, you could just build a pallet anytime you want. There's a menu option off our main menu called pallet tracking, or it's called license plating. You go in there and you can just build a pallet. You could break a pallet. You can move a pallet. It's very flexible.
Great. Our next question is about the picking function. So they said, I like the direct picking function. Do I need multi-bin to get that feature?
So the answer to that is no, you do not. Okay, so we have 3 different versions of our software. 2 of them do not have multi-bin, and another one does. Okay, so I told you in the onset we had different feature sets. So the smaller of the systems we call core does not have directed picking. But when we move to the second one called select, that does add many functions, included directed picking. And then when we move to the higher end version called Premier, that has all of those functions plus multi-bin, okay? So if you're not working in a multi-bin environment, you can still utilize directed picking and have the system tell your users where to go to get something.
Sorry, Brian, a little audio issue there. Our next question is about whether you work with the operations management module or just the PM module.
We do not work with operations management. It's an overture that we have made in the past and we've been rebuffed. We cannot tie into operations management. We can only tie into production management, which of course now is a full Sage product as of the version 2022 release of Sage. And then with the 2023 release of Sage, they have added a great number of features. So what Sage is doing is essentially they keep adding features to production management to close the gap between the feature set of operations management and what was the original features of production management. So now there really is very little difference between operations and production management if you're on the latest, 2023 version. And so that's where we're hanging our hat with Sage. So we are fully integrated with the Sage version of production management, including 2023 PU1, which we already support.
Okay. And I think this will be our last question, unless we have a last minute submission from the audience. So to wrap it up, do you have dashboards to show details about various operations in the warehouse?
Yes, sure. So for instance, there's a button at the top of the screen where you can see, show me a list of all of my open orders, show me the list of orders that are actively being picked, show me orders that have been picked but not shipped, show me orders that have been shipped. So that's just a defined one, okay? But then what we allow you to do is, we use the term widgets, we allow you to develop as many graphical displays as you want. So you can develop a pie chart or a bar chart or anything else that gives you information about anything that's happening in the warehouse, number of receipts, things like that. You could even do status of workers. For instance, we have a defined one that says, how many line items has each worker picked today? How many orders total have they processed? How many items total have they processed? So, if you look at a number of orders processed, one user may look really good and another really bad, but when you look at number of items processed, maybe somebody came in early and cherry picked all the pick tickets and got all the onesie twosies. So they processed a lot of orders, but they haven't moved a lot of volume. Somebody else may have only done one, but they've done a tremendous amount of volume. So no one metric tells the whole story. So we allow you to display things like that on the screen simultaneously. And it's totally customizable.
Awesome. That is a great capability. And it looks like we actually did get some more Q&A questions, so that's awesome. We're going to go. Our next question is, how far away from barcodes can the scan gun work? These.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I love talking about that. I'm a total barcode nerd. I've been selling barcode scanners over 20 years, so I love having these kind of hardware conversations.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know we also had a barcode expert here today.
Yeah.
So,
well, my internal name is barcode nerd. So yeah, I like it.
So this one, they particularly have, like 3 shelves of pallet slots, and they want to know, how big does the label need to be, how far away can it work, all the details.
Okay. So there's basically 3 different types of scan engines that can be embedded in the various barcode scanning terminals. The normal one is what we call standard range or short range, and that's kind of arm's length. If I could walk up to it and touch it, if I'm using my hands to move things around, that's what I want, okay? There's another one called advanced range, and with that one, I can go out, 10, 12 feet if I want, but there's a caveat here. Like when you go to the optometrist and you look at the board, everybody can read the big E at the top, okay? But when you get to that 3rd or 4th line, that's when you start squinting and you're leaning in a little closer. So the bottom line is, the bigger the thing is, the easier it is to your read. Well, barcode scanners are the same. The bigger the barcode is, the better it can read it from distance. So if you have a tiny little barcode like on a box of cereal, I'm not going to be able to read that from 40 feet away, even if I have an extended long-range scanner that's normally capable of reading up to 70 feet, which that is the actual spec. I personally scan barcodes as far away as 50 feet. I don't know why in the world anybody would want to do that, but you can do it. The point is, if you have barcodes of the right size, we'll find the right scan engine for you, okay? It's rare that we have to go to the top end unit. They're the most expensive, obviously. This new class that's kind of a hybrid between the short and the long, called advanced range, that's kind of where it's at right now. So if you're a forklift operator, we're probably going to put you in an advanced range scan engine so you can hit the barcode on that pallet out in front of you, okay? But if you're somebody that's putting things in boxes and you're working with your hands, we're probably going to put you in the less expensive, more entry-level standard range scanner. So like I said, I have a wealth of information on this topic, and I'll talk your ear off, I'll bore you to death when it comes to scanners, but just bear in mind, we can get you in the right scan engine based on your needs. So if you have those 3 racks, what a lot of people will do nowadays, instead of putting the label on the 3rd rack that's 15 feet in the air, what they do is the first cross member, okay? Like you have the floor position, then you have the first shelf that maybe, 4 feet off the ground. What they'll do is if they have 4 shelf positions, they'll put 4 labels, 1, 2, 3, 4, side by side on that cross member. And everybody knows you go top to bottom, left to right. So if I'm scanning the floor position, I scan the barcode on the far left. If I'm scanning the 3rd position up, I scan the 3rd barcode over. And that way everything is right there in front of me, and I don't necessarily need to go to the expense of the long range scan engine. So we've got multiple ways that we can do this. Just give us a call, we'll figure that out with you.
Barcode nerd, I think, is the right word for you. Awesome, awesome answer. And okay, I think this one is going to be our final question to wrap it up today. So Brian, we want to know, can you customize your scanning process of receipt of goods to include existing UDFs?
Oh, certainly, yes. So quite often we have clients that have a special UDF in Sage for, color or, something funny, or maybe even I talked to one person recently, they use it for priorities. So for whatever reason, they have priorities to their orders. And so they ask us to either read that field and do something with it, or add a field that can be captured on our handheld. So during our data collection of item codes and quantities, we can capture whatever that information is, and it flows right back into Sage. So absolutely, we do have a full custom integration group here on staff. And we don't go looking for custom integration. We don't treat that like a profit center, okay? We'd much rather you buy the vanilla version of software. That's fast and easy for us to install. But if you do have customized needs, absolutely, we can do that for you.
Okay, awesome. So that concludes today's webinar. Thank you, Brian, for super informative presentation and a really awesome Q&A. Thank you for everyone in the audience who sent us in some questions, participated in the poll. We hope you found this helpful. And if you want to find out more about Scanforce, get in contact with Brian, just reach out to your SWK rep, reach out to us at info@swktech.com, and we will connect you. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.